Thank you so much, Glenn. Phozy, alcoholic. Thank you, Carol, for suggesting that I share. It also helps me to do service. Yeah, so as if my name is Phozy, I'm from South Africa. I am 3 years sober and 2 months, and I have a sponsor, and I also have sponsees. So I'm just going to get into it. I'm just going to start about how it was for me, what happened, and what it is like now. Yeah, so I am 31 years old. I was born into a middle-class family, mom, dad, sister, brother. I'm the youngest. And yeah, I guess from a young age, there was always this feeling inside of me. From the age that I started gaining awareness about myself, I just always felt like I wasn't good enough. I always felt like other people are more worthier than me. Other children are more smarter than me. They're better than me. They're prettier than me. And I just always had this nagging feeling that I'm not good enough, almost like an inferiority complex. And I can't really pinpoint where exactly it came from, but I've just always felt that way. And I was also bullied at school, so that kind of reinforced this inferiority that I felt about myself, that these people must be bullying me because I'm not good enough. So I really learned from a young age already that if I people please and if I do what my parents expect of me, if I please my teachers at school, and if I just please everybody around me, that somehow that they will accept me and that I will be good enough. So I guess from a young age, I always seeked affirmation from everybody around me. And I never really grew into myself because I was really just fitting the molds of what everybody else wanted me to be. And at school, I was a teacher's pet. At home, I was the perfect daughter that always listens, and just does what my siblings want me to do. Kind of always had that attitude. And I always felt like I had to give people something, or I had to do something for people for them to accept me. Like I couldn't just be the way that I am and just be loved the way that I am. And that kind of carried over into my adulthood and so on. So yeah, I also learned from a young age that whenever something uncomfortable happens to me, I would automatically just act like it didn't happen. I would disregard that feeling. I would kind of sweep it under the rug, throw my skeletons in the closet. Like I just didn't like feeling uncomfortable. And so I really never processed things because they were uncomfortable, and I didn't like feeling uncomfortable, and I didn't like feeling funny emotions like anger and frustration and all of that. So I would just act like they weren't there. I was molested by a boy at school when I was 6 years old. And that was also experience for me again, where I didn't tell anybody until I was probably 27 years old. Yeah, more than like 21 years later, I actually told a soul. So I always just kept that to myself. Because again, that is uncomfortable feeling, and I cannot tell anybody about that because yeah, no, it's not. If I don't talk about it in my mind, it felt like it didn't happen. So that's what I did with everything in my life that was traumatic. Yeah, so my family life as a child, like I said, we were well looked after. My mom and my dad were both hardworking. And so, yeah, we didn't lack anything in terms of that. We went to good schools. Um, I guess when I was around in my teens, I started also noticing that stuff between my parents weren't okay. They were fighting a lot. I don't know why, but yeah, they fought a lot with each other. There was a lot of emotional instability in the house. And my dad, yeah, my daddy was a very critical person, I guess. And I think he meant it well because he loved us, or he loves us. But he was just always very critical. And again, that criticism from my dad again reinforced the idea in my head that I'm not good enough. So my actions get criticized as a child and so on. So that again reinforced the feeling that, Phozy, you are not good enough. And I would tell myself this. My mom was also an alcoholic, although at the time she was an alcoholic and addict in her behavior. Um, she wasted a lot of money in the house, and so that was a lot of the reasons why her and my dad fought. Then there would be a time when she would gamble a lot. Then around the time when I was, I guess, 11, 12 is when she started drinking a lot, or 13, 14, yeah, around that time. I noticed that she would start drinking a lot, and I would then find, bottles in the cupboard. Sometimes she would pick us up from school and I could see, she'd be drinking. And yeah, like suddenly this mom that was so perfect in my eyes, I guess, that was just the sunshine in the home and stuff, just became a shell of a person slowly over the years. And she just really, where it became a relationship where I became her caregiver. Because my sister is quite older than me, and she was already, like, she's 7 years older than me. So at that time she was already an adult, and she got married and she had moved out of the house. So it was just me and my brother, and he's a boy, so he kind of didn't, he was just with his friends all the time, didn't bother himself too much about what's happening in the home. And I just became my mom's caregiver. And yeah, I guess that again, I never grew into myself again, because now I had to fill another role of becoming my mom's caregiver, like hiding things from the rest of the family so that it doesn't look like everything is falling apart. Yeah, and so I guess a lot of the emotional instability as well as a child that I felt, just feeling emotionally abandoned, feeling like I'm not the child anymore, I'm not being taken care of, and all of these things again added this reinforcement of, you don't acknowledge things when they're not going well because it doesn't feel bad, so just act like it's not there. Again, the instability at home made me again feel like, oh well, if I was good enough, I would have a happy home. Again, reinforce that feeling of, I am not good enough. I need to do things so people like me. And so it just kind of carried on. My mom was in and out of psych wards. Um, Also, when her and my dad were fighting, they involved us a lot in what they were doing. So again, just made us feel more unstable, and that's how it went. Then it also ended when I was 15. My mom had attempted suicide a lot throughout the years, but then it finally got to the point where she got it right and she passed. And then I also had found her, and again, that was a very traumatic thing for me to experience. But I also acted like, okay, I'm okay. Like, when she passed, I was now living with my dad and my brother, so I kind of just took over her role. I just became my mother, and in my mind, like, I now have to become the caregiver of my dad and my brother, like, of doing the household chores and all of that. And then that's kind of the persona I took on for many years. Also with her death, I was suggested that we go for counseling, but again, when I would sit in front of the psychologist or the counselor, I would just act again like everything is fine, there's nothing wrong, I'm just doing just fine, and just being really dishonest. If to summarize it, I was dishonest about really what was happening for me. And because I'd become so accustomed to acting like everything is okay, that I didn't know how to say how I'm feeling. I didn't know how to verbalize what was happening with me, because I'd learned to put on so many masks. Like, I had a different mask for every situation. Life carried on, went to school, after school, went to university. Then I think when I was 19, my second year of university, I started, like, developing ulcers and deficiencies, and I just gotten really sick. And I think it was just my body's way of telling me that you're not okay. Again, I just looked past that, and that's when my journey with medication started. And the doctor put me on I can't say the class of medication, but they just put me on medication that was mind altering. And from that start, I just started misusing it. And when I got sleeping medication, I liked the feeling. And then I started taking the sleeping medication, not to sleep, but just to feel better and to change the way that I felt. And if I even backtrack in my teens, like if I would have a cold and I would get like cough syrup or cough medicine, I would also like take a lot of it because I would notice that some medication would change the way that I felt. So I guess the behavior around that was always there as well. I went over and then, yeah, I was on medication, for since I was 19. And then, just again, didn't address my health issues, just took medication from it, but didn't kind of look at the cause of those things. Then I graduated when I was 22, then I started working, and then that was now when I started gaining some independence, getting my own salary, and I think that's when my journey with alcohol really started. I did drink when I was in university, but I always drank till I got drunk. But it was manageable. I drank when there was an opportunity. I wouldn't necessarily seek out opportunities, but I would drink when there were parties or whatever. But my alcoholism really progressed when I was 22, because now I had money and I could buy alcohol whenever I could. And so I also, that same year when I started working, I started dating, and I was in my first serious relationship. And from the get-go, this other person was my higher power. The state of me being okay depended on him, depended on his affirmation, depended on how he treated me. And of course I wasn't okay, so I attracted somebody that wasn't okay. He was also an addict, but he was on narcotics. And again, I thought he was the problem in the relationship because I took medication and I drank alcohol, and it was legal and it was acceptable. It was socially acceptable to take those. It wasn't socially acceptable to take narcotics. So therefore I was not the problem. He was the addict. He was the problematic one. He was the toxic one. And I was in the problem. So yeah, you could say that was just a disaster. That was just a disaster, this person. Very toxic relationship. And I think us using in that relationship was just, it just kind of accelerated me getting to my rock bottom. I started just drinking on weekends when I would go out, but then weekends, it started just being on Saturday. Then it started being from Saturday to Sunday, because now I had to fix the hangover from Saturday by drinking more. And then I would then start drinking from the Friday. Then before I knew it, I started drinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And before I knew it, like it was now where after work I'm buying bottles, and I was still staying at home with my dad and my brother. And now I'm drinking alcohol and I'm hiding it in the cupboards, just like I saw my mom do. And I'm hiding bottles everywhere, in my shoes, in the cupboards, just drinking secretly while everybody is asleep. When I would get medication, it wouldn't last a month like it's supposed to. It would last a week or 2 weeks, and then my stash is finished because I would just take whenever. And it got to a point now where I was taking medication. Sometimes I would drink and I would have the bottle next to my by my bedside table, and just when I start gaining awareness again and I wake up in the middle of the night, I just drink and my eyes are still closed and I'm drinking just to fall asleep again. I would pop a pill while I'm still not to gain fully aware. So my go-to place was just escape, because what was really happening with me is that all the trauma that I've been hiding from childhood was just coming to the surface now. Like my cupboard was starting to like break open with all the skeletons I'd thrown in there, and all the monsters were coming out from under the bed, and I didn't want to acknowledge them. And so I also started getting resentful a lot, because I felt like, why couldn't I have the perfect TV dad? Why couldn't I have the perfect mom like other children have? Why couldn't I have my mom at my school balls, at all the significant things that happened in my life? Why could I not have a mother? Why did my mother have to be an alcoholic and somebody that committed suicide? Why? And so I always had a problem with acceptance. Like I could not accept that this was my life, that this is the life that I have. And I always wanted to be like, why can't my dad be less critical? Why can't other people be nicer? Like, why do I have to have so much responsibility now that my mom's gone? Why can't my sister take on more responsibility? Why is everything falling on me? And it was just like, his why? Like, why can't my life be the way that I want it to be? And the more I got like that, the more resentful I got. Because like God is not giving me what I need and what I want. Or at least what I think I needed, what I thought I needed. And so, yeah, like I just had that in my mind the whole time, like God had done me wrong. And it was almost like that story that it was exactly like the story that they talk about in the big book about the actor and the play. And if everybody just acted the way that they're supposed to act, then everything would be okay. And me being okay was based on my circumstances. If things were not good in my life, if circumstances were not going on my way, I was going to drink. And even if they were going my way, I'm still going to drink to celebrate the fact that it was going my way. So I was just going to drink and use it away. But I had reached the point in my life where my resentment was so much that I just needed relief. And as we do, we drink, there's consequences. I lost jobs. I would and I was also a very controlling person, like I said, because I wanted everybody to act according to my standards. Like I probably had this book in my mind, like if you are my father, these are the characteristics you have to follow. It was almost like I had this CV or this resume of people in my life, and each person in my life have to have these characteristics and requirements in order to be acceptable to me. And it was really like, if I could just have an analogy of how I treated people, that is how it was. Like, if you are my sister, do you have these requirements for me to accept you? So I was always criticizing people. And if they don't meet my standards or what I want, I would then judge them and call them selfish and call them all these types of names. Yeah, because I just lacked acceptance around everything. I also grew up in a very religious home. We went to church on every Sunday. I was in Sunday school. I was in youth group. I was even teaching Sunday school at one point. And so because like I went through the practices of going to church and, we praise and we sing to this higher power. But the truth is I never connected to that because I couldn't understand how come I am doing what everybody wants me to do. I'm trying to be perfect and I am going to church and I'm being this exemplary child in person, but why is my life so bad? Like, God, like, you're not giving me anything. I'm going to church every week. I'm giving you something. Why don't you give me something back? And that was my attitude. And so I really never, and also I struggle to reconcile the fact that how come stuff is like so traumatic at home, but then we come to church every Sunday and act like everything's perfect. Like I couldn't reconcile how church going people can act perfect in church, but then they're so different and they can sometimes be so abusive at home. And so that was really what I was thinking about God and higher power and all of that. I did religious practices, but I didn't really believe and I didn't really connect. So yeah, I just to fast forward, like we all probably have similar stories where we lose jobs, and then I would quit before they fire me because then I'm in control, and then I can say I resigned and then I wasn't fired. Again, just being dishonest, and when I would leave jobs, I would blame my managers and be like it's their fault, knowing that I didn't bring my end of the bargain. So I went suddenly from being, I guess, this perfect child that did everything that everybody else wanted to being this person that can't keep a job, that's just messing with her career, that is just gaining a bad reputation, drinking every day, being disrespectful to my father, being disrespectful to other people, not respecting boundaries, not respecting the parents of my boyfriend at the time, just being a person that didn't care anymore. And that was who I became. And so I guess my family couldn't understand that either, because they're like what happened? Like, you were like this way, now you suddenly now an alcoholic. And I was like, no, I'm not an alcoholic, because I would still get jobs, I would still gain a salary, I still had material things. So I was like, I'm not an alcoholic, because alcoholics live under bridges. I had a lot of alcoholism runs in our family. Hopefully, and yeah, it runs in our family. And the people in my family that were alcoholics now, that were deemed alcoholics to me, were the ones that lost their families, that are just like, I had uncles that just drink every day, that didn't have anything. And so that was my idea of an alcoholic. And my idea of an alcoholic was also that guy that lives under bridges, that sits on the stop signs, or at the and drinks alcohol out of brown paper bags. Like, that was my idea of an alcoholic. So I was not an alcoholic. I was young. I was just like, this is what young people do. They drink too much. Like, it's not that deep. And yeah, that was my stance on it. And so I didn't listen to anybody. And I guess in a couple of years, from the age that I was 22 up until the age that I was 28, is when I went into recovery. My alcoholism had really transformed me into a person that I didn't even recognize. Like I said, at that point, I had lost 3 jobs. I had crashed cars, my car, the company car. My family relationships were a mess. The part that relationship also ended, and I also fell apart from that relationship, because again, this person was my higher power, and suddenly this person that gave me so much affirmation was not there anymore. So now who am I? Because now suddenly I'm not all these great things that I attached my superiority to, like having a job, having a career, having money, having things, having a partner, being this perfect child, because I was no longer that anymore. So now all of these things that defined me, and that made me who I thought I was, and that made me worthy, was taken away from me, and I felt like I had nothing left. I'd also fallen pregnant, and then I decided to have an abortion because I just was a mess. And again, that was crazy to me, because I was like, how did I become this person? How did I become this 22-year-old that had her whole life in front of her, that was educated, that had so much going for her? How did I become this person? And I didn't recognize myself. At that time, I was also in and out of psych institutions. I think I've been to 3 or 4. I was psychotic. Sometimes I would just trash the house, and my dad had to call the ambulance. Once he had to call the police on me, because I was like a bull in a china shop now, because I was losing everything, and I was resentful, and I was angry, and I was bitter. And alcohol was my higher power, because alcohol would, in that moment when I drank, it would just make everything feel better, and it would just warp everything around me, because then it would make everything seem like it's perfect when it wasn't, when it was a mess. But in that moment when I had my alcohol, or if I had my medication or whatever, I was like, no, everything is fine. But then that also stopped working. And so I also tried to attempt suicide numerous times. The major one thing that I did was I jumped from a building in an attempt to kill myself. And again, that very same thing that traumatized me as a child, finding my mom like that, I now went and did that to other people numerous times. And I still felt like I was the victim. I couldn't see all the hurt and the trauma I was causing people around me, because all I could see was my pain and how I was done wrong and how I was the victim. And if you had my life, you would also drink like me. Poor me, poor me, poor me, another drink. And that was like how I was. And eventually I had gone into the rooms after another psychotic episode where I had taken alcohol and medication together, and I was walking in the streets like a mad person. Now I was like the person that lost is losing everything, that lives under the bridge. I was mimicking that person, but again, I didn't see it. I saw that again, poor me. And my brother had suggested maybe you should go to AA, because, you know, we see it on the TV and whatever. And I called into a phone line, and I was connected to a phone line, and people were like, okay, what is your problem? Very kind. And I started going to meetings. They connected me to somebody in my my area, and I started going to meetings. But again, for like 6 months in the rooms, I didn't take it seriously. Every day, every week, I would go to a meeting and I would be like, oh, I'm 1 day sober, because I would just talk a lot. I didn't listen in meetings. I just went to meetings to talk about myself and how bad my life was. That's why I went to meetings in the beginning. And people were so nice, I guess. They just allowed it. And I guess they knew, it was going to come to an end at some point. And I started getting a sponsor, and I was, sometimes I would just leave a meeting, and on my way home, I would stop at the bottle store and still buy alcohol. And I remember this one time I bought the big book while I'm still in active addiction, but I'm going to meetings now, and I bought the big book, and I would put the big book on the dining room table at home, so that everybody can see, like, I am trying, I am, and kind of like put on this facade or put on this mask that I'm actually sober because I bought a big book. But I hadn't even opened the big book to read what was happening in there. Again, just to lie and manipulate and for everybody to be like, so sometimes when they would find me drunk while I'm attending meetings, I'll be like, yeah, but I'm trying. Can you not see the big book there? I'm trying. So like, just let me be. I'm trying. I was just so dishonest. I was manipulative, hurtful, yeah, all of those things. I was all of them, dishonest to the core, to myself and to others. And it's so crazy. I always thought dishonesty was stealing something from someone, and just stealing something from someone. But I never realized dishonesty is just hurting other people, not being honest about how you're feeling. Like if I was caught out in a lie, I would always blame something. So I would always say, I'm like this because my mom committed suicide. Well, Dad, you can't tell me anything because I'm like this because of what happened in my childhood home. So all of this is your fault. And so I somehow believed that if everybody who ever did me wrong comes to me and they ask for my forgiveness, me acting as if I'm God, and if they come and ask me for my forgiveness, then maybe I will stop drinking. But until then, I'm just going to continue drinking because you did me wrong. And so, yeah, I went for 6 months. I wasn't taking the program seriously. And one day I had relapsed again and had a lot of consequences going on. And I told my sponsor, listen, I relapsed. And she was like, yeah, you didn't relapse because you were never in recovery. You can't relapse if you were never in recovery. And she was like, I can't sponsor you anymore because you're not serious. You don't want this. You're wasting my time. And that was so important that she said that to me because it was true. This person that was truly trying. Sometimes when I wouldn't go to meetings, these ladies would call me and be like, where are you? We're waiting for you. Should we come and pick you up? And all of these things. And so I would just continuously throw that in their faces, and they set boundaries with me, and they were like, you're not going to come. I'm not going to sponsor. You can come to meetings. You're welcome to come to meetings, but you're not going to waste my time and energy anymore because you don't want this. And I'm glad she said it to me because it woke me up. Because yes, I was wasting her time. And I was lying to her, and I was so delusional thinking that my lies, she won't see through them, because I thought I was a special alcoholic and I am special because I had trauma. And so, yeah, I'm different. But when I was just a normal garden variety alcoholic, and so that sponsor could see through my nonsense. And so she said to me, I really think you need to go into a treatment facility because you're not okay. And so I was one of those people in AA that had to go to a rehab, and that really helped me because I was in this confined space. I was in this protected space, and it was a 12-step rehab, proper rehab that just did everything based on the big book. We started doing big book study every day. We started working the steps. And that's when stuff really changed for me. And I put myself into rehab, and I'd gone to rehab on the 24th of December. On Christmas Eve, I arrived there. And I'm so glad for that gift of desperation, because I knew that if I had not gone into that moment, I would have killed myself. I had already planned to do that. And I'm so glad that somebody reached out from AA and said, listen, let's help you. Let's just try. And I'm so glad I listened. And my sponsor dropped me at the airport, and I went to the rehab. And that's when I took step one. then when I got to the rehab, I started listening to what was happening there. And because I'd become so disillusioned with God, I didn't have any sense of a higher power. I believed in myself. I believed in alcohol. I believed in people's acceptance and affirmation and affirming me. That was my higher power. And so I had to change that. But again, I didn't like the idea of God when I went to rehab, because although I had this religious upbringing, I could still not reconcile with how my life looked and religion. I was like, God had failed me. And so in the beginning, my concept of a higher power was just somebody that knew better than me, just something bigger than me in the beginning. So it was just like my sponsor somehow became a higher power. The big book studies became a higher power. The spiritual principles, when I didn't know what to do, I would just be like, okay, what's the next best thing according to the spiritual principles that the big book talks about? And that just became a higher power in the beginning. And that's how it slowly grew for me. Because there's an old timer in AA, Joe McCaney, that talks about, he uses this analogy of your car's broken down, right? And every day you need to go to work, but every day you're late for work because then there's a problem with the tire, the engine doesn't work one day, and every day you're just late for work, and your work life is just unmanageable because you can't get to work on time and you can't get home. You can't get home either. So your boss and your colleagues are frustrated with you. So you're like so desperate. You're like, okay, I need to fix this car of mine. And you like, freak, I don't know. Then somebody suggests a mechanic and you're like, you know what? I don't think this mechanic can help, but I'm so desperate. Let me just go to this mechanic. And you go to this mechanic and this mechanic starts fixing your car. And suddenly your car's running smoothly and you get to work on time and you're able to meet your responsibilities and your life is manageable. And every time you go to this mechanic to maintain your car and you're like, wow, I'm building faith in this mechanic, and you start believing that this mechanic can actually help you with your car. And that is how we describe this program, that the program and your higher power, whatever it is to you, is this mechanic in your life, and your car, your life, your recovery. That is how you start building, because you start seeing that if I follow these spiritual principles, if I do these step 11s, if I do these inventories, if I work these steps, I start seeing like, wow, I don't need to escape every time when things are uncomfortable. Like I don't need to hide anymore. I don't constantly need relief from myself, because these things are making my life manageable. And that's how my step 2 and 3 went, finding my higher power. And eventually it grew so much that I started going on my knees to pray. And this guy in rehab, this counselor, would always say, you know, if you struggle with getting on your knees at night, just put your toothbrush, or if you're a smoker, put your smokes under the bed in the morning. And so when you wake up, you have to go on your knees to get these things. And that was just an act of showing that I'm humbling myself to something bigger, whether it was the universe or whatever. And I just started doing these small things that became bigger things. And I started praying again, but not just praying to God to help me out of the situation, but to actually pray just for insight and for discernment around things. And that's how it grew for me. I started working step 4 and 5. I'm just going to go quickly because I see the time is running out. But I went through step 4 and 5, and suddenly now I started looking at myself. And there was a lot of things that I did that I was ashamed about, that I was disappointed in myself about. I had so much guilt and shame that I felt like if I told this to another person, if I'm honest with another person about these things, then they're not going to like me anymore. They're going to kick me out of this rehab or whatever, or they're just going to treat me badly or whatever. And so I had to start getting honest, and that's what they told me. So I was so desperate. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be honest and just put everything out on the table. And I'm so glad I did that, because when I did my step 5, my sponsor told me, listen, I also did that. And sometimes she did it even better or worse than me. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm actually not special and different. I'm just sick like everybody else in AA that comes into AA. And so through my step 4 and 5, I was also able to pick up my defects that relates to step 6 and 7. And I was able to see like, no, Phozy, you're not a victim. You just have a lot of self-pity, and many of the situations that have come into my life, like me not losing everything, it wasn't because of my mom's suicide. It wasn't because of my childhood. It wasn't all because of all the trauma. It was because of the choices that I took as a result of my alcoholism. So I was the cause of all my problems. My lack of boundaries with people were the reasons why I had resentment, because nobody forced me to say yes to all these things I've been doing all these years. But I lacked boundaries because I believe that having boundaries means that other people won't love me, won't accept me. So all of these things, all of these behaviors that I had, getting into toxic relationships because I was scared of being alone, because I couldn't stand myself, it was all me. It wasn't God that sits up there every day and has a list and like, oh, let's see how we can do Phozy wrong today. Let's see how we can make her life miserable. I'm not that special. God doesn't do that. He cares about me, but that's not what he does. I'm not that important. And I just learned not to take myself so seriously. Like if I would share meetings, I would be so nervous that I say the right thing. But then I also realized nobody goes home spending sleepless nights thinking about what I shared in a meeting. I'm not that important. I had to humble myself that like the world doesn't revolve around me. Everybody has trauma. My siblings also had trauma, but because I'm an alcoholic, I processed it differently. And so my problem was that I had a disease that impacts the way that I think and feel. It impacts the way that I see situations in life. And so it makes me not want to. The fact that I'm an alcoholic means that I don't like uncomfortable situations. I don't like it. I don't like feeling that way. I want to feel good all the time. And so I had to unlearn those old behaviors. And becoming aware of those things that my step 6 and 7 revealed made me aware of those things. And that's why I was also able to make amends in my step 8 and 9, because I could see how I did other people wrong. But if I didn't gain awareness about myself first, I could never do that. If I didn't become honest about who I really was, I could not change it, because you cannot change things that you don't acknowledge. And so then I could make amends to people, because I could see, yes, I was selfish, I was manipulative, I did hurt you. And I could go to people and write letters to them, and also learn that I don't make amends if it's to give myself relief. Like I did that once and I saw that it was wrong, because when I made these amends to this person didn't even remember. It wasn't necessary. But the point is, I made it because I wanted to feel better. I wanted to sleep better at night, and that was the selfish amend. And so I also learned that sometimes I can't make amends to everybody, because it's going to disrupt their life, or it's only going to hurt them. So then I have to do indirect amends now. Like now I have a job again, and I have to learn a different way of moving in this job. I can't be dishonest in the job again. I can't say I'm sick when I'm really not sick, because that is an indirect amend. I can't go back to my old jobs and say to my manager, I'm sorry for doing all of those things. But what I can do is maybe change the way I work in my current jobs, and I can apply this to all my relationships. I can't go back to my ex and also apologize for the way that I hurt him, because I can still apologize to you. Even if you did me wrong, I must also still acknowledge that I did you wrong. And so I can't go back, but I know maybe in my next relationship, then I'm going to also move differently and act differently in that relationship. Step 10s and 11s are so important for me, because they maintain my awareness. Because like everything in life, it's like a garden. When you make a beautiful garden, your bushes are beautiful, the flowers are beautiful, everything looks stunning. But if you don't maintain it, if you don't weed out things, if you don't take out the weeds regularly, that garden will become overgrown and ugly again. And so you have to do maintenance, and that's what step 10s and 11s are. And then also step 12, you have to, you can't just keep it for yourself, you have to give it away. So now it was like, I've just changed all the pain that I've had, I've changed it into purpose, and I'm not ashamed about what I've done anymore. Sometimes I would sit and be like, oh, and I would just cringe, and I would be like, I can't believe I did that. And then I would start feeling bad again, but then maybe I would just go into a meeting and I would share about it, and then I can connect to my tribe again, which is AA. And so now I do service, I sponsor other people, and now I'm able not to be so critical and judgmental of other people anymore, because I can also now see my own humaneness and I can see my own mistakes, and therefore I can be a blessing to other people just the way that my sponsors are a blessing to me, because I can relate to them. I don't sit on the throne again and look at people's resumes and be like, oh, do you have this to be in my life, as if I'm God. I still make mistakes. I still struggle a lot with a lot of resentment that comes up around my family. But the only difference is now is that I don't drink because of that resentment anymore. I'm able to put it in a step 11. I'm able to speak to my sponsor. I'm able to share about it. And I don't really need relief for myself to the point now where I have to drink anymore. And I'm grateful for that. So, gosh, there's so much to say still, but I'm just going to end it off and just say, I don't really need relief for myself anymore. I don't need to run away from myself anymore. Recovery hasn't been easy. It took me 2 years to get a job again and to be independent again. But I was able to withstand that and not drink through that because of this program. I've lost people due to COVID and disease and to death, and I didn't have to drink because of it. And I'm grateful for that. Yeah, thank you for letting me share.